And Gina, take it away.
Good morning, everyone, once again, and welcome to day 2 of the Judith Erb College of Education annual Spring Symposium, hosted by our Diversity Committee. My name is Gina Collier, and I'm a graduate within the College of Education. I'm studying curriculum and instruction, and I also serve as Diversity Ambassador for the College of Graduate Studies. So through my role as Diversity Ambassador, that's how I was actually connected to the diversity committee within the College of Education. And ever since then, it's been like a really wonderful experience. I shared this with them in the last meeting. I'm really enjoying my time with them, but it's really nice to see behind the scenes the work that people are putting in to make initiatives and things like this come to fruition. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to the committee for orchestrating this, for taking me under your wing, letting me join in on the chaos or the fun, however you like to kind of view that. And they've put together a really great program today. So as you know, our theme this year is cultural competence as an ongoing project, learning from our communities, our students, and ourselves. And I'd say our Friday evening panel, based off of the discussion that we just heard and my personal opinion, was a pretty great start. So hearing the different perspectives, challenges, the expectations of some of the community leaders was really a testament to why events like this are so important and impactful. Connecting local leaders from various sectors just expands our perspective and really increases our empathy for understanding one another. So if you did attend yesterday, I wasn't sure how much time we had and how much time I'd have to like fill the welcome space. But since it's in my notes, I'm going to go ahead and ask if you were here last night, maybe give a reaction or maybe drop a comment just to say maybe a takeaway that you could share with the group. And in the spirit of inclusion always, if you weren't here last night, just maybe chime in on some things that you're looking forward to for today, just so the group can see. So key takeaway for me personally was when Sheena Barnes mentioned this concept of ally versus accomplice. To her, an ally takes breaks, but an accomplice does the work. And I don't know, that just kind of had me reeling for a little bit. And so I got on good old Google, which took me to the YWCA website, and it had a really great explanation that I wanted to share. So the term accomplice encompasses allyship, but goes beyond to advocacy. An accomplice uses their privilege to challenge existing conditions at the risk of their own comfort and well-being. And I just thought that was such a relevant point for her to make as we're talking about cultural competence within our community, being able to understand the difference between ally and accomplice, and being willing to make those changes to progress and go from the individual to community and taking greater action. Again, we're so thrilled you're here today, and I'm confident you'll leave with something gained, whether that's perspective, insight, maybe information, maybe a raffle prize. And in just a few moments, we'll hear from our school panelists today. So the personnel from Toledo Public and Perrysburg Schools are joining us today, so welcome to you all. I'm excited to hear this discussion because it includes perspectives from various sectors within the education system. So it's always cool to have, leaders, but hearing from the teachers that are actually in the classrooms and just hearing from different people on the board, it's going to be really cool. I'm really interested to hear what they have to say. So thank you for joining us, and I know that we'll look forward to hearing your perspective. And then after that, we'll have a chance to break out. That's going to be really cool as well. We're going to hear from our actual UT faculty, staff, administrative people that are going to share with us the work that they're actually doing that enhances cultural competence. So I'm all about action. Conversation is a great way to start. You have to start somewhere, but action is what I'm really interested in. So thank you again for joining us. I am so excited to keep moving forward in this conversation to push towards actions. I encourage all of you to take notes, use the chat features, reaction. It's really cool to be like, right now, I'm looking at all of you. It's cool to see like reaction, so it makes me feel like I'm not so alone, or maybe that you're getting my point or not. And the chat feature is also really great to share some of your thoughts. I love reading the chat and hearing other things that others in the group are thinking or wondering, just like me or maybe different. So feel free to use some of those features. And as we're going through the day, I know it's 3 hours, but for me, I don't know, learning is always fun. But just kind of keep in mind, it's through our willingness and commitment to learn that we'll be able to create the positive changes that we're working towards. So I had two directions of who to turn this over to. Initially, I was told to turn it over to Dr. Hamer to talk about the raffle, but then this morning I was told to turn it over to Dean Whitty. So I don't know who wants to go next, but I'm done.
So let's hand over to Amira, not Amira. Oh my gosh, Gina. Thank you so much for that warm and inspiring welcome. So let's hand the mic over to Dean Whitty. Thank you, Dean Whitty, just to say a few words.
Yeah, I think everyone would want to know more about the raffle. At least I do. So I think that's more important. But I'll be as quick as I can. You asked what impressed you or what impressed us yesterday. I think Mr. Schumann's statement about the sacred trust to teach the truth, I think that's core. And I think that has stayed. I mean, I think we know that, but it's great to hear someone say that so that we can all gather around that notion. So that's what stuck with me. And yes, welcome again. This has been a great experience. I expect today to be just as productive as yesterday was. Yesterday, I did a short intro, and I mentioned as educators, we're all about learning, especially lifelong learning. And I think that's, just kind of the saving grace, if you will. Imagine real quickly what you knew when you were 15. And imagine if that's all you knew and learning stopped at that time. And that's all you kind of had for the rest of your time. And then imagine you're 25 and this is what you know. Now, some of you will struggle if I say, imagine when you were 35, because we have a lot of young people on the call, and I know all of you are probably not 35 yet. But for those of us who are, just imagine what you knew then, and if that stopped. So I say that just to make the point that we're always trying to understand and learn about our world and everyone in it. And I think that's the key here. And in particular, today, we're going to learn from our colleagues in the field. And I think that's very important for especially individuals at the university level to keep in constant contact with their colleagues in the field, because that's where really everything is happening. And that's where it's important to really listen, understand, and continue to have that conversation so that we can then translate that into effective instruction, learning experiences, and opportunities for our prospective teachers before they go out into the field and even as they're going through their program. So I'm excited about what can happen today and what we will learn. So I guess I'll end with um, classes in session. So let's start the learning. So Lynn, I guess I hand it back to you to talk about the exciting raffle.
Just real quick, thank you, Dean Whitty. Thank you, Gina. We will, everybody here is going to get a prize of a gift certificate to Jarrah's Heavenly Sweet, and it will be entered in a raffle for gift certificates to the Chosica Peruvian American Restaurant. On the note of institutional competence, schools have to support their neighborhood businesses because our neighborhood businesses support us. I would also mention, I'm not seeing for sure that Mr. Hostler and Ms. Mayfield have made it on the call.
Tom is here.
Oh, great. Okay, great. I just didn't see that. And if Ms. Mayfield, are you?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. Okay, very good. I will then turn it over to Rhonda.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Hamer. Thank you all from all of us who I am sure are happy to be here today for another exciting and nourishing day as we unpack so many interesting aspects of education. And one of the reasons for today being absorbing is in fact 9 reasons and 8 wonderful folks we have as our panelists. And in the one dynamic moderator we'll have is my co-chair, Dr. Lynn Hamer. So my job is to ask for a little bit of your time, hopefully no more than say 5 to 7 minutes, so that I can introduce you to our panelists for you to have an idea of the powerhouse Avengers team that will be responding to Dr. Haber's probing inquiries. Now, the biological information I'll give you on each person will be understandably brief. But we are making more detailed background on each person available to you on our website. And Josh will provide that link to our website so that you can spend some time reading about their backgrounds. Now, if you can't resist the temptation when panel is ripping along and you need to find out more about any of these 8 good folks, you can sneak a peek. But of course, you'd be more fulfilled if you heard the discussion, made the notes, and checked the bios afterwards. So here goes. Just share the screen. All right. So I will introduce no special order of priority. Dr. Durant is a native of East Toledo and a proud graduate of not just one, but 2 Toledo institutions, Wade High School and the University of Toledo. Go Rockets! He was an outstanding football player at both, employed by TPS since 1999. Dr. Durant has been a teacher, administrator, assistant superintendent, and since 2013, he's been the 30th superintendent of Toledo Public Schools. Welcome, Dr. Durant. Principal Angela Hickman Richburg has been a teacher all her working life, qualifying at UT with her for a Bachelor of Education, go Rockets again, a Master of Education, and an education specialist, moving out to start her teaching at Toledo Public Schools in 2000 and continuing there for 12 years. Now leading Rosa Parks Elementary School, Mrs. Richburg believes that as a servant leader, it is her responsibility to empower all people so that they can empower our children. Welcome again, Principal Angela Hickman Richburg. Now, here comes someone in education with a difference. Mr. Sean Nelson. He's an attorney, the legal counsel of Toledo Public Schools. Sean focuses his practice on education law and the labor of employment law. He represents boards of educations and private schools in all areas related to education, from personnel to student issues to special education law and labor and employment issues, and Title IX compliance. So, in the order of the court and in the classroom. Welcome, Mr. Sean Nelson. And now we move on to Mrs. Amira Archer, is an educator and one of our family members who focuses literally on the right chemistry. She is a proud graduate of TPS and UT, where she earned a Bachelor's of Chemistry in 2009, a Master's of Education in 2013. She's now pursuing her PhD in Curriculum Instruction, which is so exciting for us. She's currently teaching physical science, chemistry, and an avid Jesup West, I think, Scott High School. I'm so sorry. I'm so excited. Her primary goal is to collaborate with teachers, teacher educators, and pre-service teachers to ensure that all students are equitable, access to a successful path with which would lead to a promising future. All the right chemistry. Welcome, Mrs. Archer. All right, 4 more to go. We're hanging on there. Just 4, hold on to your seats. And because it keeps getting better, more and more interesting. Superintendent Thomas Hosler has been a school superintendent for 21 years and is now superintendent of Perrysburg Schools. There, he saw a need for greater efforts to achieve inclusivity. And in 2014, he formed a superintendent's diversity committee. As the work of the committee grew, in 2018, Perrysburg Schools CQ Community Team was born. CQ, which I'll explain in a few seconds. And let me just spell that for you so that you can get it, as you can see on the screen. Community is spelled I'm going to use my phonics, then in all caps, unity. Spelling out unity. And CQ means cultural intelligence. The team's vision is to support the district's mission of ensuring all students achieve their greatest potential and that the diverse talents, skills, and experiences of all students, staff, and families are valued, respected, and supported. Welcome, Superintendent Hosler. 3 more panelists to go from the CQ Community Teachers Fair. Miss Kathy Mayfield teaches 7th grade English Language Arts at Perrysburg Junior High School. This year marks her 10th in the classroom. Congratulations. She graduated from the University of Toledo as a member of the first cohort of the Judith Herb Scholars. She joined Perrysburg CQ Community Team in 2018, and she continually works to expand her cultural competence, improve her curriculum, and help all learners feel represented. Welcome. Hilary Steinmiller emerged from UT in 2001 with a bachelor's in secondary math education. Then 3 years later, she left UT with a master's in educational administration, another UT. She's now in her 3rd year as principal of Toth Elementary School and has been part of the CQ team for all 3 years with the district. As a teacher and administrator, Hilary's personal and educational beliefs are centered around the importance of establishing genuine and meaningful connections with the students and families in a way that fosters learning through embracing our differences. Welcome, Ms. Steinmiller. Mr. Patrick Hall is in his 4th year as an English teacher in Perrysburg schools. He's currently wrapping up his studies in educational leadership and pursuing licensure to become a building administrator. As a co-chair for the Perrysburg CQ community, Patrick believes that the purpose of education is to heighten one's sense of awareness of surroundings in order to have a positive influence on our environment for the benefit of all of us who share this environment with each other. Welcome, Mr. Hall. And that wraps it up, I believe, for our panelists. Now that you've learned so much about who they are, let's sit back and learn even more about what they think. I thank you, everyone, and hand you over to our competent Dr. Lynn Hamer.
Needed to unmute her mic. It's nice to see you all. I will be as polite as possible. I have asked the committee why they keep assigning me the role of telling people to stop. And they said that they had no comment on that. So I'm going to announce each question that we've assigned to you. I'm going to ask you to try to keep your answer to about 3 minutes. I had said 3 to 4 minutes, but we redid the math, and closer to 3 minutes will be great. I'm going to let a little bell go off when we get to 3 minutes, and if you would just use that as a signal to sort of wrap it up, that would be great. I am honored and humbled to be with all of you educators. It's an amazing panel. So I'm going to announce the order that I will call on people for the first question. It'll be different each question. So for the first question, we'll start with Dr. Durant and Superintendent Hosler, then Ms. Richburg, Ms. Steinmiller, Ms. Archer, Ms. Mayfield, Mr. Hall, and Mr. Nelson. So our first question, Dr. Durant, how do you define cultural competence?
You know, cultural competence, I look at it in essence of a proficiency or an element of a social IQ of not only those that you serve, but the broader community. It all starts with the building blocks of having an open attitude in regards to cultures that are unlike your own. At the same time, have a self-awareness about your own culture in regard to whether it's race, religion, or just locality has its own culture within itself. At the same time, having some cultural knowledge in regard to the culture that you work with, not only knowing one of your own, but the ones that you are unfamiliar with, which helps with cultural tools, which allows the individual to engage in regard to language or whatever else that may be. One of the things that got me into the cultural competency is my father. So I was heavily recruited coming out of elementary school, could have went to any private institution or any school for that matter, at least in Northwest Ohio as well throughout the state. And one of the things that my father had told me when making the decision, this is not going to be about education in regards to textbook because I'm responsible for that. And I'll see to it that you have that. You will take the highest AP courses and everything else. But the reality is you need a social education, which is something that I can't teach. You have to experience. You will go to a public school, you will learn that balance. At the same time, you won't be led, you will lead. And that really helped my competency of truly understanding kids from different social economic students with different diversity. I tell people, and again, that was an education 101 on diversity of understanding the various ethnicities, at the same time, the religions within itself, but then truly being able to engage in conversation, because again, there's more than just race, there's more than just religion, age, and etc. But you have the total culture of poverty in regard to the communication tools and all the things that exist of improvision within that really makes a difference. So, and to sum it all, truly you have to have more than an intellectual IQ. You have to have a social IQ, which may get you a lot further in today's industry and working with individuals. Because again, people as well, children don't care what you know until they know you care. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Superintendent Hostler.
Oh, thank you. I really don't have much to add to that. Dr. Durant stepped on all of my lines, which he does frequently. So, I think that definition is right on. So, and as educators, it's up to us to make that to keep that focus on the students and how do you do that. And I think Dr. Durant outlined, being self-aware, being aware of others. And I think that's really important. So I don't have anything to add to that definition. So thanks.
Thank you. And we'll find this first round is a little shorter generally. So Ms. Richburg.
And likewise, following Dr. Durant is a daunting task. Nonetheless, for me, cultural competence, of course, is understanding, others' cultures. But to me, it also impacts biases and recognizing your own and tremendously building relationships so that you can build capacity for understanding of all. But again, Dr. Durant definitely touched on that. Yes, that's all I have.
Excellent. I can be a little looser later on since you're saving all your time. Ms. Steinmiller.
Thank you again. I agree that everything that I had down in my notes was already said, and probably said way more eloquently than I was going to even share. So, I agree with all of those points, and truly, my first year of teaching, I know that was something that was shared with me is, again, just it all relates back to connections. And so I think that in order to be able to create connections, that piece of cultural competence is being able to look at your journey and where you've been, and really just trying to lead by example with students, and now that I'm an administrator, with staff, of how we can continuously learn from each other, and just again being open-minded and willingness to appreciate the differences that we have, and recognize that that's going to be where we can make things happen. We embrace those differences and work together.
Thank you so much. Ms. Archer.
Thank you. So I just wanted to add that sometimes when we are thinking about cultural competence, we have to take a step back and think about what is our idea of culture. And oftentimes we distill culture down to just a race or ethnicity or sexual orientation, but we have to acknowledge that culture impacts all things around us. So there's the culture of our subject matter, there's our district culture, our school culture, as Dr. Durant alluded to, there's the culture of your locale, and all these different things. We situate ourselves to say, oh, let's learn about the culture of our students. And then sometimes we look at a classroom as just a group of students who may have one culture, but there's intersectionality. Me, myself, I'm a woman of two or more races. So I have Middle Eastern culture, I have Black culture, I have the culture of a mother, which I tell you, we could have a whole panel on just being a parent, right? I'm from Toledo, so I have Toledo culture is a big part of a prideful part for me. But also, I'm a science teacher, and I have to recognize as I'm going into the classroom to teach science that there is a stigma behind science culture that impacts my students. There is educational policy, there's culture within educational policy. Just yesterday, Fadi was on the panel and he was talking about how he called ODE and he had a situation with one of his students and they responded, we don't have 100% graduation rate. And they were just trying to tell him up front, your student might not graduate depending on their because of their circumstance. But there's a myriad of cultures that are impacting our students in the classroom. So we can't just look at the students like we have to learn about their individual cultures and then that'll be enough. We have to learn about the systemic ways that culture has impacted us and how we should navigate that in a way to be able to attend to the cultures of our individual students. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mayfield.
Hi, thank you. It's so interesting to hear what everyone has to say regarding this topic. And, I come from the perspective of a culture that tends to need a little bit more pushing to become even aware of cultural differences. And I hope that this is a safe space to share those shortcomings that I know I've experienced in my own life. And in thinking about this definition, I came to the knowledge piece, but I think especially being who I am, there was an element of attitude that I think came with cultural competence, and that being curiosity. I think a lot of folks need to have that innate curiosity to learn about other people and learn about different cultures and how all of those cultures interact with each other. And I also think there needs to be a sense of humility that comes with cultural competence. And I know for myself, there were so many instances in my youth in which I think I gave myself a little bit too much credit than I really deserved for thinking that I was suddenly cultured. Part of my experience in UT was taking part in the Camp Adventure program, and that entailed visiting different military bases and serving as a camp counselor over summers. And I remember coming back at age 18 from South Korea and thinking, I've lived in a different country. I know what it's like to be a minority, and I now know everything. And it took, being hired as a teacher to learn that, oh my God, that was just a drop in the bucket of so many different complexities of being a human and learning about different people. So those two traits of curiosity and humility, I think, are necessary components of cultural competence.
Thank you so much. This is getting interesting, isn't it? Mr. Hall.
Yeah, these are some brilliant people to have to follow up. I'm thrilled to be here, and this is an incredible opportunity. And to Kathy's point again, hoping that this is a safe space. That I'm not proud of who I've been, and a lot of my beliefs about education are about continuing to be aware and continuing to learn about my environment and to positively infect that environment. I mean, for me, cultural competence is about genuinely attempting to understand something that I don't. And it's about, ultimately, I believe it's about empathy and being able to empathize with others. And, I don't know if anybody is aware of David Foster Wallace or the speech that he gave at Kenyon College, This is Water. But I just want to read a tiny little segment from that. He once said that learning how to think really means learning how to exercise some control over how and what you think. It means being conscious and aware enough to choose what you pay attention to and to choose how you construct meaning from that experience. And those words really do resonate with me as a teacher. How can I what do I consciously think when I'm in a moment is so important to being culturally competent. And it's something that I want to keep in mind moving forward all the time. So.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. More and more complex. Mr. Nelson, finish us off for this round, please.
I'd say, wow, this is a tall order to follow these folks. I'm not sure actually how I got on this panel. I'm not technically school personnel, but I'm very fortunate to be speaking amongst all of you. And I'm fortunate enough to represent Toledo Public Schools in all aspects, and so I will bring that perspective to this talk. Legal disclaimer, because I'm a lawyer. This is not to be construed as legal advice. Consult with your legal counsel. But as a lawyer, I look to the American Bar Association to provide some guidance on lawyers have ethical duties amongst legal duties, and the American Bar Association has provided us with guidance on this topic. And one of the quotes that stuck out to me from a book by Raymond Carroll is, "Culture is like the air we breathe. It's largely invisible, and yet we are dependent on it for our very being. Culture is the logic by which we give to the world." And so it's obviously a very large topic. It permeates everything and anything we do. And as a lawyer, and the lawyer for Perrysburg folks as well, as your lawyers, we have an ethical duty of competence. And so with that competence, it's everything that you would think of as far as your lawyer being diligent and knowledgeable, but it's about being more than knowledgeable about the law. It's about the ability to adapt work and manage in new and unfamiliar cultural settings. And so I try to the best of my ability, bring that perspective to all of my legal advice that I provide to the district. I provide trainings on various rights of students, staff, LGBTQ plus, harassment, non-discrimination, all of that to me, providing that training, educating the educators, which is a special privilege for me. All of that, I think, assists in the cultural competency.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so everybody else, all of our participants, be writing down a few thoughts of your own as far as what you're making of this. I'll give you a little preview. Our questions in the breakout rooms will be, what opportunities do you recognize for your practice based on what all these wonderful panelists have been giving us? What opportunities do you see for yourself and for your institution? And what threats or weaknesses do you see in your own teaching and administrating or in your institution's work? What threats and weaknesses do all of these ideas bring up to you? So please take a few notes on that. That would be great. Our second round, we will lead off with Superintendent Hostler, then have Ms. Richburg, Ms. Steinmiller, Mr. Nelson, Ms. Mayfield, Mr. Hall, Ms. Archer, and Dr. Durant. And that second question is, what does it mean to be culturally competent for the students and families who you serve? So give us a glimpse of those. And Superintendent Hostler, if you'd start us out.
All right, well, thank you. I think, what does it mean to be culturally competent for the youth and families whom we serve? So I think coming at it from a position of, we often talk about the students that we serve as kind of being seeds, and that's kind of a theme throughout education, that we're growing students. And I like to think that, in Northwest Ohio, we're blessed here because we have very fertile soil, and we can plant that seed, and it doesn't take a lot of effort sometimes for it to grow and to flourish. I know right now that they're able to plant crops and harvest in the Middle East, in the desert. And so that cultural competence, I think, for our families and how it looks, is recognizing that every one of our students is a seed. And some are able to be planted in soil that doesn't need a lot of nurturing. And some are planted in a harsher, in the desert. But the bottom line is, as an institution, as teachers, as administrators, we have to recognize that all those seeds can grow. And what can we do to make sure that we can do what we need to create an environment where they're going to thrive? And so I think that's what it should look like from a student and a parent. And we try to eliminate those barriers, but acknowledging that growth can happen anywhere. And we have to be able to make those adjustments to ensure that it's going to happen. So I think coming at it from there, maybe others have a different view from how it may look from a parent or teacher, but I think that's where I'd like to jump into this piece. So thanks, Lynn.
Excellent. What a great foundation for us. Ms. Richburg, will you give us your view?
Yes. So to be culturally competent for our youth, and let me make it just specific for Rosa Parks in particular. So we are very intentional about the work we're doing. So for example, we are an avid elementary school. While we focus on instruction, we also focus on culture. With that, this year we've had a pervasive focus on an Afrocentric culture. And so we have been intentional about the work we're doing, meaning from the curriculum and providing supplemental supports, getting together with our teams, inviting our parents into the conversations, honing in on subgroups so that we are supporting all of our students. Yesterday, Mr. Schumann said we have a right to tell the truth. I believe that. So while you'll walk in our organization and you'll see the walls say we believe and we support different cultures, it is very important that we unpack that for our educators, our parents, and more in particular, our students. And I'll just share to hear a first grader say, "Mrs. Richburg, I was so happy to learn more about Dr. King." What was just breathtaking, and it's an acknowledgement to say, continue to do the work that we're doing. We may not see that with our middle schoolers yet, but we are planting those seeds. So it is about staying woke and being aware for all.
Thank you so much. I love your first grader voice. Ms. Steinmiller.
So I'm gonna borrow Amira's point or build on Amira's point that I do think, for me at least, what does it mean to be cultural competent for our youth and our families is to first understand the culture of the staff, because while our kids have their individual cultures, our staff does too. And so I think that, part of my responsibility is to recognize where people are in their journey, and for people who are there and ready to make that good trouble, support them and encourage them, and figure out ways that we can build upon that. And I think that also involves understanding and listening to our families. The best way to, I think, help our students is to have experts come in and have experts share their experiences. And when I'm saying experts, I'm talking about like our own Toth families. So, we will try to find, for example, I'm just thinking because it's coming up and actually started today, but, we have parents of students who are celebrating Ramadan or participating in Ramadan, come in and they'll talk to our classes so that our kids can understand why their friends might not be wanting to run around at recess or might not be eating lunch in the cafeteria because they can't, so it doesn't become more of a friend thing that, in elementary kids don't want to play with each other. It's that, there's reasons for that. So we try to invite our parents in to share their cultures. And, again, I consider them the experts. COVID's changed a lot, and I think it's kind of turned how we do things, but instead of maybe going on field trips, we were trying to bring field trips to us. So one of my first grade teachers had a gentleman from the the Gallagher culture zoom in and do a field trip with his class to talk to the kids and show you know, his family and the baskets and the purpose and the history behind it. So that's been pretty cool to see how we're taking these changes and trying to maximize our opportunities to expand our kids' experiences. And that's what I think, you know, for me is just being there to support teachers when they have these ideas of what they want to do. And if a student, you know, asks if their family member can come in and speak to the class or, you know, talk about this, it's really trying to figure out ways to make that happen so that we're aware. And again, hearing from the experts and people who are.
Wow, you are good. That was right on the money. Thank you, Ms. Miller. Mr. Nelson.
I'll be brief on this topic because I do defer to the educators who are on the ground. But I will say that two traits that I see from my perspective that can really help to serve the students and the families versus create issues. The two traits for me would be self-awareness and the ability to empathize. And so, you know, we're all given, you know, innately varying levels of that to start with. But the more of those I see, the more self-awareness I see among educators, the more ability to empathize, the less issues come to me. That's all I have.
Thank you. Ms. Mayfield.
So being culturally competent in my role as an English teacher in junior high, it looks very different from administration, who I agree, they lead the way in terms of finding out where their teachers are at and where they are on their journey. As an English teacher, being culturally competent, I've learned, is being very, very aware of your impact and separating your intent from your impact. And I know that's a phrase that many in this panel and in this meeting have heard before. And it's one that teachers need to continually work on. In my position, I've worked with largely white, Christian, cisgender educators. And a phrase that I hear over and over again is, I'm just respectful to my students. I'm just nice to everybody. And too often, I think that's seen as a replacement for cultural competence. And the harm that can come from that, I'll share in the various districts I've worked in. There was one student who shared with me, and she's a Black girl. She shared how she has a teacher who's very nice, but her teacher talks to her differently. And this was years ago, so I'm using present tense, but this was in the past. I asked her what she meant by that, and she said, well, you know, when all of my peers walk in, this teacher says, good morning, how are you? But then when I walk in, I get a what's up? And it's well-intentioned, but she recognized, and at the 7th grade level, the impact was she did not feel more welcome in that environment. She knew that the teacher intended to welcome her, but she felt separated, you know, by being treated differently. And that might have been something that the teacher, you know, was subconsciously doing and was maybe thinking that they were being accommodating to different cultures, but it was not landing the way that I think that teacher intended. And when she told me that, of course, it brought to mind so many things that I would have done in the past, or probably am still doing, and I'm not aware that I'm doing now, that, I mean, that moment for me was very, very awakening. So when it comes to cultural competence and returning back to the topic of English, I feel as if I'm a bit of a curator of humanity. You know, in 180 days, I have to show students the entire range of human experiences through literature and through nonfiction. And that's a huge responsibility, and it's one that requires constant auditing of your messaging and the texts that you're choosing and the stories that you're telling and being aware of the stories that you're not telling. And it's very complex, and it's something that it's a journey that never ends, but it is one that I think, especially in English and social studies, teachers need perhaps even more training on. Thank you.
Thank you. As a former English teacher, I appreciate how you put all that. Mr. Hall.
Yeah, also as an English teacher, Kathy, that was brilliant. My heart is just bursting with everything you just said. I mean, I'm a straight, white, cisgendered, middle-class man teaching in a primarily white school district, and I'm very familiar with what is the dominant culture in this country. And the old cliche, right, is that teaching is about relationships. And, you know, if that's true, then my job is to maintain 120 plus relationships on a daily basis with my students. Oh, and then there's coworkers and administrators and everybody else that we have to maintain relationships with. And our school district mission statement is ensuring that all students achieve their greatest potential. And that word all is so important. Again, we live in I serve a pretty affluent community that, again, the US Census shows that it's about 89.6% white, and that has its own challenges when it means being culturally competent. So our school union contract caps our classrooms at 27 students per class. And Mr. Hostler always, you know, he talks about how our teaching staff is doing our best to serve the 26th and 27th student, and, you know, referring to different subgroups of underrepresented students. And if teachers can make the 26th and 27th student feel like they are welcomed and like they belong and that they can achieve their greatest potential, then we're being culturally responsive, right? By getting to know them and validating their worldview and their beliefs. But it's also important to note that so many of us in this panel or in this meeting, we are the 26th and 27th student in one way or another because of intersectionality. And as an English teacher, to Kathy's point, representation is so important. Like, we need to bring in stories that represent the 26th and 27th student, whatever it is that makes them who they are because of intersectionality. And to be frank, this is the greatest part of teaching. This is what I love the most about my job, is getting to know my students and bring their stories into the classroom and get to share the opportunity of that story with them. Because again, I am a guy that grew up very privileged and was not aware of a lot of these things. And getting to hear these stories has literally, I mean, it's what gets me up in the mornings. And, you know, as the co-chair for Perrysburg School CQ community, again, we want to make sure that all students' diverse experiences, backgrounds, and talents are supported, valued, and respected. And I'm really proud of the work that our organization has done to provide PD opportunities for staff by attending conferences and conducting studies. And yes, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Ms. Archer.
So I wanted to piggyback off something that Ms. Mayfield said and Quatez and I were also talking about. But when we're trying to be culturally competent, we want to refrain from trying to study the salient or visible aspects of their culture and then generalizing it into cultural stereotypes. So being culturally competent is not just picking and choosing what aspects of students' cultures you want to uplift and then turning a blind eye to other ways that culture has manifested in our classrooms. For instance, Dr. Durant will tell you our students in TPS are dynamic. They're not only interested in, I mean, I teach at Scott High School. So, you know, I've had student teachers come in and they want to make their lessons include, you know, raps and all types of other things. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool. I do have some kids interested in rap, but our students are dynamic. They're interested in botany and animal care. And I have had students ask me if they could bring in their bearded dragons, and, you know, some of them breed turtles, and aerospace and cosmetology and medicine and, you know, all of these different great things. Their interests are not just confined to the salient aspects of their culture that you can see. But then, you know, we can't say, all right, well, let's figure out all these different things that they're interested in and then attend to those aspects of their culture and now also talk about the ways in which police brutality has impacted their lives, and not give them space to talk about how they feel living in over-policed neighborhoods. That's a cultural aspect that's manifesting in their neighborhoods. And it's not that I'm not giving them a space to say negative things about police officers, but I'm not going to hinder them from being their true selves, or we're talking about ways that aspects of culture or systemic issues have impacted them. And, we're kind of turning a blind eye to those things. So I think being culturally competent is really being immersed in the culture of this people that you're working with. We can't look at them from the outside, learn about them, and not learn with them. We have to be immersed with them, building relationships, as Mr. Hall just said. But it's also allowing them to tell you what is important to them, what are the things that they are experiencing in, so that we can truly but we can truly attend to all the aspects of all these different cultures, and not just the visible ones that we can see. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Archer. And now, Dr. Durant, if you'll finish off this round, that'll be great.
I appreciate everyone's comment, and so I'm just going to add to it. But in regards to being culture competent to those that we serve, obviously requires a certain knowledge as well as ability to relate, to engage in these conversations. So when you talk about it, and starting off today's presentation, I want to say to my Muslim community is Ramadan Mubarak, which is the honor and happy of saying happy Ramadans, because it starts today, the month-long fast. But again, just the competency of understanding what today represents. When you come across a culture who represents the Muslim community, you have an ability to acknowledge them in a way they appreciate. But at the same time, you have to recognize all the elements of the culture. So I can tell you, in essence, when it comes to Ramadan, how are you handling Ramadan as a school system? Because these kids are fasting during the hours that you have them. And at the end of the day, they're engaging in athletics, gym, as well as even testing, because Ramadan is the same month as testing. So how are we conscious of these children when they go and take tests, knowing they haven't eaten and they're coming off a long day of fasting and so forth? So these are conscious efforts that we have to be conscious of, as well as other cultural tools within even just that religious community. I know at one of our schools, we have somewhere around 10% of our females at the school wears hijab. During 2016, when the election was happening, once the election was official, we had our Muslim community who were apprehensive of sending their children, or I should say their daughters, to the school because of the hijabs, and didn't know if it would be understood based on the change of presidency. What we did was took a month long, and that month at that school did a lesson on hijab. Every child learned how to make one. Every one child learned how to fold one, and many of them wore one. And I could tell you the Muslim community were in tears because they truly appreciate that they haven't had to sacrifice something within their religious belief due to social elements. But again, that takes some understanding in regard to be ahead of it, opposed to trying to always be behind it. And so within that truly makes a difference in regard to how you relate. I can tell you in regard to our students, the locality, I come from the east side. When you tell somebody from Toledo, hey, I come from the east side, I represent the nickel. Most people, if you're not from the nickel, you don't know what the nickel is. Nickel is the 05 zip code is where you represent, but we have that genuine conversation about, what it means to be from the east side. Understand the east side was the original downtown of Toledo. When they moved it across the water, the east side was a second thought. And in order to forget about it, in order to identify the new era of moving downtown upward, the east side got left aside. And that's how that's how we felt for years. So when a young man at the press conference I did in January, Mr. Jeremy Pratt, who represents the Young Men of Excellence program, and said, I don't want someone outside of the culture to come talk to me or talk to us in our community. I want somebody within the community who understands what we're going through. So when I tell you, you can be successful from the east side, I lived it. When I tell you anything that you could achieve, I can speak to it because I come from the same community you come from. And at the end of the day, that really resonates with the kids much more because they recognize, oh, Lord, they done pulled the hook on me. That's the end of today's sermon. I'll be going to the next question.
That was a perfect conclusion. Thank you so much. All right, in the next round, our third round, we will be in this order: Mr. Nelson, Ms. Mayfield, Mr. Hall, Ms. Archer, Dr. Durant, Mr. Hostler, Ms. Steinmiller, and Ms. Richburg. And our third question for our beautiful contestants today: what kinds of problems or barriers with cultural competence do the youth and families whom you serve encounter? What are the barriers that we see? And Mr. Nelson.
I'll tell you, following all of you fine folks is it's a tall order. So I will do my best, and let me know, in the comments, or if you want to have questions or speak to me. Otherwise, I lack the dynamism of some of you, but I'll do my best. So as far as problems, I always say, and a little tongue in cheek, but if everyone were reasonable and everyone did everything right all the time, I wouldn't have much to do. But that's, fortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, I do have a lot to do. And my involvement with students, staff, families, uh, that typically occurs when cultural competency fails, when it breaks down. That's when I get a call, when there's a lack of understanding amongst your students, your staff, your families, really communication breakdowns. And whenever I'm doing trainings among educators, unless superintendents, maybe even Dr. Durant, but most people don't want to see me. I'm not the person you want to call. I'm not the person you want to talk to. There's some folks on the call who unfortunately have had to talk to me. Try to make it as painless as possible, but I'm not the person that you want to see in your daily basis. Your jobs are important. You're educating the students. If I'm involved, something has gone wrong. And so the problems that just happen generally, alleged bullying for various aspects, failure to accommodate because of disabilities, gender identity, sexual orientation discrimination. The Bostock Supreme Court case addressed employment discrimination regarding gender identity and sexual orientation in employment. And that also relates to how we as school districts are required to treat our students. And those things represent a large shift, not only in our culture, but in the law. And there are some folks who disagree. And there are some folks who are not on board that train and they don't want to do these things. And so when I'm called upon to educate folks, to talk to them about specifically what the law requires, I always tell them, and I don't, that typically, if they're not inclined to listen to me, they really don't like this part. But your personal views, as far as the law is concerned, your personal views are irrelevant. It doesn't matter to me what you think of Bostock, what you think of that Supreme Court decision. That's irrelevant to what you're required to do for your coworkers and your students. And I think that can, depending on your inclination, some people say, sure, that's absolutely right. Other people, it hits them a little differently and they have an internal pushback. But for me, that's where I see the problems and the barriers, is when folks there's a failure to understand each other, and maybe not wanting to do so, and then I have to be involved. And like I said, I'm not the person you necessarily want to see.
Thank you so much. Ms. Mayfield.
This is such an interesting question with the districts that are featured, because I live in Toledo, and when I'm driving to work, I cross into a red county. And I was listening to Dr. Durant discuss ways in which his district was making Muslim students feel included. And I was asking myself, how would that land in Wood County, almost any district in Wood County, and specifically Perrysburg? And the barriers to cultural competence in Perrysburg, I think, of course, stem from a lack of diversity. Now, Perrysburg is becoming increasingly diverse, and so that's a wonderful thing, and it's bringing about much needed conversations and changes in our schools. But there is pushback, and you've probably seen it in the news. There's a lot of pressure to adhere to what people perceive as traditional and therefore best. So that is reflected in sometimes a chilling effect on teachers, and this is in part due to the national conversation as well around CRT and kind of the mania that has surrounded that. The chilling effect looks like teachers just a little more hesitant to push themselves and to push their curriculum to the next level because they don't want to upset people. And I understand that because I have been on the receiving end of some folks who thought that maybe what I was doing that I perceived as inclusive was not appropriate or, you know, violating their beliefs. And so that's a barrier that I think is unique to school districts across the country that are in more conservative areas. You know, another part of the lack of diversity is the lack of representation in students and in our staff. And that goes across many identities. And I see students so often who are marginalized, who accept treatment that in my belief should not be accepted. And you know, that's people making jokes at their own expense of their own identity in order to, you know, achieve the acceptance of peers or to fit in. I mean, in junior high, there's so many social, you know, struggles that students have to try to overcome. And I have seen, you know, issues regarding the N-word pass or, you know, students who are Asian making jokes about, you know, who they are. And it's something that, again, it comes back to the staff. The adults are the ones who have to try to shut out the noise of politics, essentially. And I'd like to give Mr. Hassler a lot of credit in that, because despite the pressure that we face, I have only ever seen him continue down the path of, no, we're still going to have our Diverse Learners Day every year. We are still going to offer the same PD. We're not going to let this outside conversation from a small group of people change the path that we're on, because we know it's the right path. So even though we have those struggles as a culture, we are still moving in the right direction. For that, I'm very thankful.
Another impeccable timing. Oops, except for me. Mr. Hall.
To echo a lot of what Kathy said again, I think the biggest challenge, you know, that we face as teachers trying to do culturally responsive work is the opposition to inclusivity. You know, there's legislation across this country. Obviously, Florida's gotten a lot of press, but House Bills 322 and 327 in the state of Ohio. Lawmakers are trying to silence educators. They're trying to make us out as elitists that are trying to control and indoctrinate children. You know, in our own district, we've had some politically charged board meetings and elections. And, you know, these people are in the minority. You know, they have been defeated in elections, and but unfortunately, they're still the loudest voices. And that's really, really unnerving as a teacher. It's really unsettling, and it makes my job very difficult, and it makes my personal life very difficult. I come home with all of these stresses that they don't prepare you for in teacher education. And you know, you can't go a day without somebody sending you a screenshot from somebody posting something on Facebook that says, look at what Mr. Classroom teaching about gay people, or teaching about diversity or equity, or a buzzword that they love to make something that it's, you know, make it out to be something terrible. And that's something that's really, really difficult. Again, that permeates even my personal life, and something that it's so hard to prepare for, but it doesn't mean that the work isn't worth it. I mean, that's the biggest challenge, right? That's the biggest challenge, is the opposition to the inclusivity of our work.
Thank you for bringing that big picture in, Mr. Hall. We better all be paying attention to that. Thank you. Ms. Archer.
So I'm thinking, just from my perspective, that some of the biggest problems and barriers are a lack of attention to invisible barriers, right? So we have this normative idea. Well, we have a culture around what normative school looks like. School should look like this. Students should come in and they should do this. All students should come to school all the time, and they should be on time all the time, and they should do their work on time, and they should get homework and I'm not saying that I disagree with some of these things, but when a student is experiencing something outside in their life that maybe we don't have access to, or we're not aware of the trends in which people experience things, then we take all these ideas of school and we're like, because they're not fitting in this box, let's blame the parents, or let's do this, or, you know, it might take a simple phone call. You know, we had a student who was not coming to school, or all of a sudden her attendance was spotty. And because we have freshman clusters within TPS, all the freshman teachers meet and we're talking about our freshmen constantly. And so I just called the parent, and she was like, I have a daughter who's in a wheelchair, and if I have to get her on one bus at one time, and if I get her on the bus, then I can't walk my other daughter down to catch her bus. So, you know, I can only get one kid at the bus at the time. And, you know, she's having these barriers and these issues that nobody even thought about on our end, because we don't know the situation, you know. Or yes, parents might be busy, but they're working because they are traditionally only have access to jobs that are lower wages, and maybe they have to work outside of their, it's just so many different barriers that we're not considering when we're in the classroom, because we only have our idea of what school should look like. So I think some of the issues of being culturally competent to be able to help or you know, that our parents and our youth are experiencing, are these invisible barriers that we're not considering, that are still impacted by different cultural, you know, systemic cultural problems within our districts, our neighborhoods, our countries, our states, our schools, etc.
Thank you, Ms. Archer. Dr. Durant. Unmute. Need to unmute.
Yep. In regard to the different challenges and barriers that exist, you know, just within education and beyond, I think we're up against a cultural mismatch. You know, I always tell people at the end of the day, if you're in public service and you have no sense of cultural competency, you're going to have challenges such as we see today. And you're going to see that in all public service jobs, whether it's police, fire, whether it's education, and all these other things, merely because there's a misidentity as well as implicit biases that have brought about based on experiences as well as what you portray and pick up from the media. But when you talk about some of these barriers and such for us, is that, again, we just came out of one of the barriers as well, as I shouldn't say we're out yet, and that's the pandemic. And I think when you really talk about cultural competency, how are you addressing those you serve and understanding the barriers that a lockdown will create? So as a district, we had to look at it from the competency before we could look at anything else. Meaning when you're dealing with the culture of poverty, you're talking about how are kids going to eat. When you deal with culture of poverty, do they have laptops? They need to have. When you deal with poverty, you realize, is Wi-Fi in the home? Well, you better make sure it's in the home. All these other elements that we had to really account for, because we truly needed to be in touch in regards to those that we serve based on our free and reduced lunch, around over 90%, as well as that many of the other things in regard to mental health and all those other aspects, in regard to even looking at the cultural competencies of understanding health risk, in regard to the pandemic and the COVID virus, the impact it has had on impoverished communities, merely for the fact that their social environment had created health risks that made them a higher act of fatality. But again, and the other things that we haven't talked a whole lot about today is the culture of social media. Our kids are at a high level of depression. It had been scientifically proven and spoken about by Facebook in regard to exposure to their platform will create anxiety and depression. So the whole culture of kids going through that aspects of it and such forth is a true essence of creating barriers, because they're picking up ideologies that's incorrect. They're getting on platforms and listening to things that are not correct. And at the end of the day, it leads them down the wrong path. So again, truly being in touch and saying, one, we got to understand the cultural awareness, but two, what are those cultural tools individuals are using who are spreading the wrong message, the wrong narrative, that we understand that kids that can be toxic to the environment of schools or communities. But again, those are all the aspects that you know, you could think of in regards to those barriers, and they continue to be many. But I think what's in the next question in regard to how you prepare will be a better discussion as we move forward to the next question. But again, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Durant. Superintendent Hostler.
Thank you. Thank you. I think, you know, I think as a educational system and staff, I think we have to put our money where our mouth is. And we sometimes are willing to talk a good game, but are we willing to do what's necessary to do the right thing for the students that we serve? And that's not easy. And we have, on the call, we have two excellent teachers in Perrysburg who have made that decision with many of their peers that we're going to continue this work. We have a principal who has, taken kind of the slings and arrows to do the right things to create that environment. Schools are changing more quickly than communities. We're a community that just 10 years ago, our students were 89% white. Today, we're 80%. And we need to continue to acknowledge things are changing, and we need to change with that. With our staff, that is 96% white. But I have to tell you that it is very, very challenging, especially in districts like Perrysburg. We are ground zero. So when they talk about facing challenges, what Patrick Hall was talking about is 2 Saturdays ago, parents were demanding to meet with board members to talk about somebody recorded his introduction to Of Mice and Men, setting the stage for the characters. That's the world that we're living in today. And you, as administrators, aspiring administrators, you need to make a decision. Am I going to stand with my staff who are doing those things? Because it's going to come at a cost, and that is board meetings where people are there and they're saying things and doing things. We had a protest against critical race theory before one of our board meetings this summer. People in the community brought people from Florida up on a bus to do a rally, and they supported two candidates, who if elected, probably their first order of agenda would be to get rid of me and shut down the CQ committee and those things. So, we're at a really critical stage here because not everyone is willing to sign up for that. And we have to make sure that we're supporting each other, supporting what we're doing, and willing to really put it out there for our students, because it does make a difference. When we hear from our families, when things happen in this community, and they do, and they will, having the ability as an organization to say, this is happening and we need to address it, that's not an easy place for us because we're Perrysburg and we do everything great. We're one of the best school districts in the state of Ohio. So to admit that we need more work here, we need to address a situation that happened, we have to do those things because our families are watching us. And so it does take a little bit of effort, a little bit of sacrifice, but that is going to be the only change. I was invited to be part of a program that Owens Corning put on, a lunch and learn, and we talked about some of these challenges. And the schoolyard is really ground zero to this conversation. At the next board meeting, people came to the board meeting and said, our superintendent was part of a panel, so I'm anticipating this will also result in that, with people who were promoting critical race theory with Owens Corning. And why in the world would we have a superintendent that would do something like that? And my question is, how in the world can't we have a superintendent that is willing to do that? We're preparing students for the future, a future that we know in the job site and in the world and the neighborhood. We have to have students that understand each other and can work with each other and tolerate each other and love each other. And this is where it starts. So there's significant barriers that we're facing, but I hope that it's kind of the last vestige of that movement. So thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Ms. Richburg, if you will, oh no, I'm sorry. It's Ms. Steinmiller next. Ms. Steinmiller.
Okay, so I'm just going to throw this out there that I do not like following Dr. Durant or Mr. Hostler. So we'll just go with that. But no, I kind of playing off of what I was sharing before about supporting staff who are ready to go, and the teachers like Patrick and Kathy who are wanting to just dive in and make this a part of our everyday lives. I think one of the barriers that we face is, again, recognizing the teachers and the staff that aren't there yet, and how do we get them on board? and I apologize because I'm not sure when I was logging in, but the one gentleman that was speaking about data, and throwing just putting data all and recognizing that. But that was something that was just really interesting for me. This is my third year in Perrysburg, and we haven't had a normal year yet with COVID and then the hybrid learning and all that. But prior to this, I was at Springfield Local Schools. Prior to that, I was at Toledo Public. And so I feel like those experiences have really shaped who I am as a person, as an educator, and recognizing that in trying to be the cheerleader for the staff and parents that, ready or not, these situations and these things that we have to talk about are coming at the elementary level, because you hear that a lot, is like, well, the kids are too young or they can't handle these conversations. And you're either going to be prepared when they happen, or you're going to be playing catch up while they're happening. And why, I say that is because last year there were two students who came to me and shared that one student was gender fluid, one student was gender neutral, and we were working through as a staff, okay, what changes do we have to make? How are we going to address this? How are we going to respond to parents? And I think that that's the toughest thing in the elementary part, is that these kids are friends. They're classmates, they're peers, they like to play together at recess and they partner with each other. But then when you get that parent of the student who does not have those same beliefs, now you have kids who are put in the middle. This is my friend I've known for so long, and they're my favorite person to play with at recess, but my mom's telling me that, or my dad's telling me, I can't anymore. And they don't understand that. And so those are two of the biggest barriers. And, again, helping our staff to understand that we have to be that resource. We have to be that that ally and that advocate for all of our students. We have to create a space where all of our students and all of our families feel supported, feel heard, and not necessarily, because I know how hard it is for the teachers when you're not sure, you're not all the way there to begin with, and then you get the posts on Facebook and the negative comments. It's recognizing that it's easier to hide, but it's not the right thing to do.
Thank you. Wow, Ms. Steinmiller. Now, Ms. Richburg, if you will finish us off.
All right, such a loaded question. I'll just delve into it. To be quite honest, there are so many barriers. It is definitely hard to list them all, but I'll give you a few, and some have been named. One is low SES, low socioeconomic status, of course. Social media, entertainment, which all impact our students emphatically. One issue we're dealing with is physical aggression, right? And it is highlighted, it is broadcasted, and it impedes our organization. I often talk with my counselor. She's on in this session, Miss Phoenix, and we go back and forth. And so again, yes, we do start with our staff so that we are having conversations so that they can ultimately understand the students they serve. So for example, we had a staff meeting where we watched a video with uncomfortable conversations with a Black man. Most of my staff don't look like my students, right? But it's important to understand where you are so that you understand your biases so that you can move beyond that. That becomes a barrier for our students. In another example, I had a teacher state A referral was written because the student said, she's yakking me, she's gonna yak me. And I don't know what that means. And I tell them, just as well as you do your academic research, do your hood search. Understand the language they're using. I said, listen, I yak all the time. I'm a yacker. But my teenage daughter taught me that. It is about understanding what our students are going through. But again, our staff, we have to be open-minded, address where we are to move forward. Something else we said we needed to focus on, and I don't think we did a great job of this year, is having more intention on SEL. Our students coming off of COVID, they have been totally unstructured. I shouldn't say all of them, but many of them have been unstructured. So when they come in the classrooms, we have to rebuild the walls. So yes, it's very difficult to focus on the academics, which is what we're focusing on, right, as a priority school. But more importantly, we have to communicate with them. We have to build understanding, and we have to build those relationships. Because going back to what Dr. Durant said earlier, they don't care what you know until they know you care. And then this leads to the next question, so I won't go there. But until you really have evidence that you are building relationships, it really doesn't matter at this point. So our students are dealing with a lot of barriers at this time, and our families are too. That social media, oh my goodness. And it comes back into the building. So we are constantly giving them life tools so that their social IQ can raise, and lessons so that they are motivated, encouraged to stay with us academically, behaviorally, and more.
Perfect. All right, thank you for round 3. And our fourth and final round, we will be led off with Mr. Hall, followed by Ms. Steinmiller, Ms. Archer, Mr. Nelson, Dr. Durant, Ms. Mayfield, Ms. Richburg, and to bring to a conclusion the round and the panel, Superintendent Hostler. So as our panelists know, this question is really aimed for us. I see it as aimed to us in the Judith Herb College of Education. We're asking you to tell us, what kind of teachers do you want us to be putting out? What kind of teachers do you want us to be modeling for the teachers who are coming out to you? Not to be too self-centered on this, but that's what it's about. So our question is, what do you wish teachers, and especially those who are studying to be teachers and those who are teaching future teachers, what do you wish those teachers would know and practice in order to be culturally competent? Mr. Hall, if you would start us out.
Yeah, and again, I just want to preface this with thank you for allowing me to be here. This has been incredible to listen to these panelists and to gain some insight here. This is incredibly self-reflective for me, and I'm very thankful for this opportunity. So thank you. But we can't lose sight of ourselves, right? Like, teachers entering the field are going into an incredibly difficult profession that takes as much as it gives, but what it gives is so, again, it's so self-fulfilling. Like it is everything. It's the best part of my day, right? And we need to remember why we want to teach and why we want to do this work. Why is diversity, equity, and inclusion important to you? Again, I'm so proud of the work of the CQ community at Perrysburg Schools, and would encourage any future teacher to get involved in this work wherever they find employment. You know, in an interview question, or you know, when you're asked what questions you have for the person interviewing you, ask if they have something like this. Ask if there's a way to get involved. Personally, as a teacher, if somebody asked that and I was on an interview panel, I would be thrilled to hear that somebody wanted to be involved in this work. I guess the important thing, again, and you can see this on our Perrysburg Schools CQ webpage, is that, you know, cultural intelligence or competency is not about being an expert, right? It's about being able to be aware and reflective and know your biases and having an interest and motivation to relate and adapt to different cultures or culturally diverse settings and experiences. And I guess I would encourage to, again, just get involved, ask questions, be curious, read books, watch movies, and get to know the people that you're around, and always be aware of those surroundings.
Thank you so much. Ms. Steinmiller.
To echo what Patrick said, I truly appreciate this opportunity to be a part of this panel. It's inspiring and definitely gets the adrenaline pumping when you're surrounded by people who are passionate about this work and realize its importance. So, I guess for me, for new teachers coming in, I think it is about, as Patrick said, remembering who you are and really finding the right fit for you. Making sure that if you are wanting to, be this leader in change, that you're going to have colleagues around you, administration around you who will support that. The biggest way to squash enthusiasm is to just get, hammered from the outside, but then not have that support system on the inside to remind you of the importance of the work. Just making sure that the future teachers know that it's going to be important to take risks. You have to take risks if it's something that you feel is important. Figure out a way to take risks and make it happen. And then again, just thinking about what we were going through and learning last year within my own building. I was very encouraged, and I will say that when we were talking to our two students and trying to figure out and work the support plan and what they need, I really did lean a lot on my student teachers, who it was really they kind of helped us and talk to staff that again might have been struggling with their own personal beliefs and things that, how do we create that environment where, again, all students feel supported and encouraged. And so, just remembering that that's the most important thing. If you are in that public service, you have to be in it for the students. You have to be in it to support our families. It's not about you. It's about them always. And so, just keeping that in mind and really not being afraid to speak up.
Thank you so much, Ms. Steinmiller. Ms. Archer.
As my fellow panelists have said, thank you for inviting me. I'm happy to be here. I see Judith Herb on the call. Hi, nice to see you. So in answering the question, what do I think teacher educators should be thinking about? And I would say problematize the content. Teach them to problematize the subject matter that they are teaching. They can learn how to be culturally aware of different diverse groups. But if they are knowledgeable, culturally competent of the groups that they're serving, but then they are still teaching their subject matter in disparate ways, then they are still subjecting students to inequitable school experiences. So go beyond just implementing diverse perspectives into the content. Teach the students to problematize the subject matter. Teach them to ask whose perspectives are valued in this, whose cultures this subject matter centered around, whose experiences are valued here. Well, my daughter just brought a book home and she reads a book every day at her school. She goes to Grove Patterson. She was reading the book and it was about Garth and his wife. And she was reading it and it was the whole book. They just talked about Garth and his wife. And at the end, she was like, and she's in first grade, Mommy, his wife never had a name. They just called her his wife. what about us ladies? And I'm like, that's right, baby. She's 7 years old, but I'm going to teach her to be critical of the content that she's reading. I'm going to teach her to think about whose voices are valued. I'm going to teach her to think about who's not included. And I'm going to teach her to advocate for herself, no matter what she's learning, and, you know, and not only in school, but as she moves through life. I want her to be an advocate for herself. So, you know, just as Rosa Parks is, they have problematized their content by incorporating Afrocentric curriculum into their school, and that's great. That tells the students, no, you might not be included in this science curriculum, but it's not because you're not a scientist. It's not because you can't do science. It's not because you're not worthy. It's because whoever wrote this science curriculum did not consider you. And I want them to think about that, because I don't want my students to internalize, I'm not a scientist, I can't do science, I'm not science material. No, baby, it's not about you. It's about the people who wrote this curriculum. Now let's talk about that. Unlearn anything that rejects you. And I want you to have a critical eye when you're looking at all these materials. And I just want to also include that yesterday on the panel, Fadi talked about how he was so excited in school when he was in school because one of the units included a unit on Islam, and he's Muslim. And then when they got to the unit, they spent half a period talking about it, and then the other half they spent it talking about the Romans. And he said he just felt so disappointed. Like, he was so excited to get there. Then when they got there, he wasn't reflected in his curriculum. And I hear that a lot about students just not feeling that they're reflected. So teach your students to problematize the content that they're teaching. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Nelson.
Just echo what everyone said. I feel personally unworthy to be among a panel of all of you, but I do appreciate the opportunity to be here. And so with that, I say it with the utmost respect to educators. I think your profession is quite literally the most important in our society, because no one can do anything unless someone teaches them how to do it first. And so you are preservative of everything we do. And the best part of what I get to do on a daily basis is help you all solve your problems and get to where you want to go. And I hear a lot in these conversations about what you want to do, the problems, and where you want to go. So that's literally the best part of what I get to do. But with all that, and with the utmost respect, I say this, you all have an immeasurably large responsibility to your students and to society. And, you know, I'm the lawyer, so I come and I talk about the laws and what the laws require folks to do. But the law is a floor, it's not a ceiling. And so the law is what you have to do at a minimum. And that's a large part of what I do and educate folks on. But there's more that you can do. There's more that you can do to fulfill the needs of your students and communities that's above and beyond just what the law requires. And now the laws should be just and they should provide everything that we want, but that's not always the case. But that doesn't mean you can't do more. And so specifically to future educators, I mean, you already realize how important it is to learn. And I'd say you at least internalize it's important to learn, particularly in the areas that you're weak or that you've had little experience with. And whenever I provide presentations on the law, but I think it's directly applicable here as well, you're not an ostrich. You can't just bury your head in the sand. It's your duty to your students and to your communities to be self-aware, to empathize, and to try to understand what you don't know. And with that, what you folks are doing today, you know, we're all lifelong learners. Practice law, I don't know law, when we practice, it's a lifelong learning profession, as is yours. So just encourage you to continue to educate yourself in this space.
Thank you so much. Dr. Durant.
Again, I just want to thank Dr. Hamer, University of Toledo, for putting it together. Thank our fellow educators, TPS Proud, as well as Perrysburg Proud, Mr. Hostler. So thank you all for being on, and appreciate the work that you do, because it doesn't go unnoticed. But the one thing, in essence, I can advise for those, particularly being educators or those who are training up educators, is to be intentional about your decisions and your work. So when I say, in essence, my father raising me with being intentional about my brother and I, my sister's exposure to develop a social IQ. So even within your own home, you have an ability to be intentional about their upbringing, whether it's the school that you choose or the programs you allow them to get involved in, so they do get acclimated to the various cultures outside of their own. At the same time, understand that there's a social development within your own educational development. Be intentional, Meaning when I came as a student teaching, the first thing I said to the dean is, I want an inner city school. Do not put me in a surrounding Toledo school. Do not put me in the suburb. Put me in the inner city school. That's what I want to be at. Because I was being intentional about wanting to do the work within it. And I ended up at Nathan Hale Elementary. But again, was excited, but more importantly, making sure that I was in control of my exposure and experience. And as educators, bringing up educators, conscious of, hey, we want to make sure that you're developing practices and exposure to various different environments and demographics. So here's where you're going to do your messages. Here's where you're going to do your student teaching. Here's where you're going to do whatever that is in field experience work. But again, that adds to the richness of what you're receiving. At the same time, understanding that we're in the work with the University of Toledo, creating opportunity for future educators. So right now in TPS, we have the Young Educator Program. Ms. Ritzberg, who is on here, has a large number of students we have identified, along with several other elementaries. We're at about 74 to 75 identified elementary school students. We are creating a 7 through 12 magnet school with the University of Toledo, being able to get kids earlier in age, because one of the things that we find when it comes to gender, as well as race, if you don't get at it early enough in age, many times social media has changed their thoughts on whether it's going to STEM careers or just going into certain careers such as teaching. And so we want to get really within that foundational aspect of when kids truly want to be firefighters, police officers, as well as teachers. At the same time, in regards to understanding the cultural background that you serve, because at the end of the day, it can be very valuable to your teaching. I told people I taught geometry, particularly when it comes to angles, through the community neighborhood. So I told kids, you know how your brother or your sister or whoever is driving your car is leaning back in their seat? That's an obtuse angle. That is greater than 90 degrees. Some of our kids are being raised by grandparents. You know how she's all squinted to the steering wheel looking cute? That's an acute angle. It's less than 90 degrees. But when you take your driver test, you better have back straight, eye forward, and you better be able to put a book between you and have a 90-degree angle. And so I saw kids, when they started looking at angles, they first started leaning with it and leaning forward. And eventually they just started seeing it. But again, they never forgot it. I'll see these kids to this day, that's 20 years later, saying, Dr. Grant, this is an obtuse angle. I said, that's exactly it. But again, it's those tools that you're leveraging from the culture that they see day to day. They tell their own parents, you're driving at an obtuse angle, or you're driving at an acute angle. But again, it engages them into their own environmental experiences, and that allows you to leverage learning, which is the background knowledge that you're building upon. And it's very essential, and you can do that across the entire curriculum. One of the things that I always appreciated was learning about the Buffalo Soldiers. You know, I'm a football player. At the end of the day, I told people I went through football with the nickname of Hitman. When I heard about the Buffalo Soldiers and understood the name behind it, it gave me goosebumps. Because I understood Jack Pershing leading a black regime in the war, but I didn't know Buffalo Soldiers were giving this name by the Native Americans because they felt like when you go against black soldiers, you fight to the death. And that just gave me to say, I would have loved to have been a black soldier, a Buffalo Soldier at the time. But again, it tells you how the richness can reapply to different kids based on really what their reality, what they're going through within life.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Ms. Mayfield.
Thank you all so much again. Ms. Archer pointed out that Ms. Erb was here, Judith Erb. I didn't realize that until the end. It made me very emotional to see you. I hope you remember me, and I would love to send you my contact information and catch up with you because, man, you've really impacted my life in so many more ways than I realized when I was in my 20s. I do want to go back to that point that Ms. Archer made and to give some practical advice for teachers of teachers. I know for myself, the critical piece, being critical of the curriculum that I was teaching, that did not hit me until maybe year 5. And I would love for that to be a trait that future teachers acquire in college. So those teachers of teachers, I strongly encourage you that before your students, you know, they end up in the classroom and they teach a curriculum that they love and that they're very emotionally attached to, encourage them to be critical of it while they're learning about it at the college level. Because I have found for myself, there was an awakening moment where I audited my curriculum for who I was representing. And I did this across grade levels. And I looked at the state standards and I had this epiphany that, oh my God, the standards are systemically impacting what we teach. It's emphasizing British literature. It's emphasizing teaching authors who had an easier time being published in history. And when I presented my, my text lists and my identities and the standards to my department, in my mind, I was so hyped up about it that I didn't think about how it would land, and didn't land very well. I should have softened it. My department was at the time people who looked just like me. And so I had to kind of go back and meet them where they were at. The teachers were so attached to what they were teaching that it was hard for them to accept that it maybe wasn't best for our students to represent just, a very flat or, singular identity. So again, at the college level, please encourage your future teachers to not just learn the standards, but criticize the standards and think about why the standards are the standards. And, whether what we teach really is serving our students appropriately. Also, some practical advice for teachers of teachers. To be completely honest, I cannot remember what any college textbook ever really left with me. But I do remember, in my 20s, watching movies and music videos or documentaries on Netflix that brought me so many more aha moments than I really had when I was college aged. So I encourage you, I know that there is an expectation for higher level thinking and for exposure to more complex texts, but also consider meeting your 20-somethings where they're at and adding media that is already within their realm and is something that they want to talk about and piece apart and talk about how it impacts their classroom. For the future teachers who are on the call, my practical advice for you is to diversify your own media intake. So whatever social media that you are on, make a conscious effort to include voices that you maybe have not considered, because those are planting seeds for yourself that will lead to much greater conversations and areas of thought that you may not have really considered thinking about before. We simply don't know what we don't know. So take some time, go to Twitter, start following some people, some educators who don't look like you or don't worship the same people as you or live different lifestyles than you. And you will find yourself feeling much more fulfilled in your career as you work with students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mayfield. And Ms. Richford.
My wish for teachers and future teachers. Well, for teachers, I want to say continue to sharpen your tools. I would be remiss if I did not mention how Dr. Durant stole intentionality. You have to be intentional in the work we are doing. Continue to collect evidence. If you don't have evidence, start collecting evidence of building relationships. Stay woke, right? What does that mean? Go to a football game, make a phone call, have lunch with a student, set yourself up to delve deeper. We've been doing the work, becoming the educator they need. It is so important to relate to the students you serve, whether it is inner city, urban, rural, or suburbia. Make sure you are relating and building those connections. Be a change agent. Be willing to be visible in the community with students alongside of you. It goes such a long way. I hadn't even talked about the curriculum aspect of that. But again, I go back to the relationships. Again, professional development to enhance, to network with other educators. And I'll just share this. This year, we had an educator who said, you know what, this isn't for me. So I share that with you to say, be honest. This work is not meant for the weak or the weary, okay? But with that being said, I don't hire or fire, but nonetheless, I gave her permission to protect her peace, right? She was fine with that. Thank you. No, I'm not going to hold that against you. You do what's best for you and your sanity. We've had a heavy emphasis on social emotional wellness. It is real. So protect your peace. Some other aspects, some tools I have received from professional development. Bring the energy. Bring high energy. You that doesn't cost a thing. Stay passionate about the work you're doing. And if you're not passionate, find elements in which you can be passionate about. Again, this work is not meant for the weak or the weary. Be reflective. Be reflective in your craft. You have to. Every day is a new day. As a matter of fact, at 9 o'clock, 9 o'clock is different from 12 o'clock on a daily basis. Self-care is a buzz, it's just going around. But more importantly, protect your peace, protect your mind space, because this work is not meant for the weak or the weary. Again, get active in the community and bring your students alongside with you. Some other note. Did I get it?
You nailed it. That
Well,
was
thank
a
you. Thank
beautiful
you.
last line. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Superintendent Hostler, will you conclude us with your statements?
Well, thank you, and thank you, and appreciate the invitation. And Dean Whitty, thank you for allowing these forums to take place. I know there's been a significant push, and it's not just words, but it's actions that you're leading with the department and reaching out to districts, and it's noticed. And so as a UT alum, thank you for all that you're doing, because I know it's not easy. I think one of the things is, you think I thought about what it was like for me to be in the College of Education back in the, when I was there, all 6.5 years, because I was on the 6.5 year plan. We'll save that for another time. But one of the things I think we have to realize is we're graduating teachers who are going into, Angela, you mentioned this, they're going into rural districts, they're going into suburban districts, religious schools, charter schools, urban, career tech. And they might be listening to these conversations saying, you know what, I'm going back to where I came from, a small town and outside of 60 miles southeast of Columbus. Why is this important to me? Why should I have to pay attention to diversity? Why does it matter? And I think we have to do a really an important role that we have to do is making sure that the students understand that it matters, because in our district, we talked about, how do we do with the 26 and 27 students? So in a classroom of 27, we do really well with 25 out of those who are that typical Perrysburg student. But that 26 and 27, what are you doing? In Ohio today, 50%, roughly 50% of the students that are out there in our classrooms are living in poverty. So what are we doing about those students? And they're not all in Toledo, are they? They're in rural poverty looks and feels much different than urban poverty. So we have to prepare students to understand that number 26 and 27 in your classroom, that number is those students are going to change, because it might be the military family whose parent is being deployed for 6 months. It might be the student whose parents are going through a divorce. It might be a whole variety of things that are happening in that student's lives. So this is important, whether you're teaching in North Baltimore or Point Place. You have to understand what this means and why it's important. And I think we really have to sell it to those students that they have to understand that the classrooms they're stepping into are going to be different than the classrooms they left as students. And we have to be prepared for those changes. And if this isn't your thing, there's a great career out there for you in insurance or being an engineer, doing something like that. And that's wonderful. We need those folks. But if you're not hitting the ground in the morning thinking about how can I make a difference in our students' lives and helping them achieve, regardless of who they are, regardless of how my personal beliefs, when they're there in front of you, I'm going to make a difference. Otherwise, there's a State Farm agency right around the corner that's calling for you. And I think we just have to be honest about that. So, but thank you again for the opportunity to share, and we hope it's helpful. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Hostler. Terrific last words. And let's give a round of virtual applause for all our panelists. This was a fabulous panel.